Welcome to the station where we talk about space exploration. I am your host, Noel Baga. Today, I am going to react to a NASA video of its Artemis program, how we are going back to the moon. For those of you who still don't know, NASA has plans to go back to the moon very soon under its Artemis program. Let's go watch the video.
Between 1968 and 1972, America launched 9 human missions to the moon, 6 of which successfully touched down, allowing 12 men to walk on the lunar surface.
Wow.
NASA's next chapter of lunar exploration, called Artemis, has the task of not just to the moon to create a long-term human presence on and around it, but also to prepare for
human presence.
complex human missions to Mars. In short, everything must be able to do here. We must first do here. So, what will an Artemis mission look like?
So they're planning to go to the moon and the Mars.
Astronauts. This is their deep space, human-rated spacecraft called Orion, built in 3 parts. The crew module, where up to 4 astronauts will live and work throughout the flight. The service module, with life support systems for the crew and its own engine and fuel reserves. And a launch abort systems with engines capable of pulling the crew module to safety during launch should anything go wrong. To accomplish...
Okay, so, wow, this is so exciting. We're seeing that NASA has a plan to go back to the moon to establish a long-term human mission to the moon, and then NASA has a plan to go to Mars. And they're treating their journey back to the moon as practice to go back to Mars. This is amazing. This is an amazing feat for all of humankind. NASA, represented by NASA, humankind is going back to the moon, and from there, humankind is going to Mars. This is amazing. All right, so these are the 3 parts of the launch module, and the crew module, which would be going to the moon, would be called Orion.
To accomplish the task of launching our crew and heavy payloads, NASA is building the Space Launch System, comprising of a cargo hold, an exploration upper stage, a massive core stage, and 2 extended solid rocket boosters. Altogether, this is the world's most powerful rocket, and it exceeds the legendary Saturn V rocket in numerous ways. Sitting on the launch pad, the entire rocket, fully fueled, weighs just over 6 million pounds, 5.2 million of which is just the fuel. Once ignited, there was no stopping what comes next. All 4 RS-25 engines and the 2 solid rocket boosters come to life, thundering our crew upwards. 2 minutes after ignition, the solid rocket boosters are spent and released. 8 minutes after launch, the core stage is depleted and separated. The upper stage fires briefly, placing Orion into a parking orbit around the Earth. Here, the crew will configure the spacecraft and check systems to confirm everything is ready for deep space travel. With a go from mission control, the crew reignite the exploration upper stage engines to leave Earth entirely. The exact timing of this maneuver is critical to reach a speed that can escape Earth's gravitational pull, but also put Orion on a course that will intersect the moon days later. Once this burn is complete, the upper stage of the SLS is jettisoned, and the crew aboard Orion coast for several days toward all that awaits them at the moon. Approaching the moon, we see the fundamental differences between Artemis and Apollo. Instead of requiring Orion to serve as an expendable lunar command module or to carry a constrained lunar...
Right, so what we're seeing is that the module, the spacecraft, which would be carrying the 4 astronauts to the moon, is called Orion. And after they take off from Earth, the Orion crew would be orbiting the Earth in the meantime, while they check their systems, and they would use Earth's gravity to slingshot themselves to the moon. Once after they've checked all of their systems, and once they have gotten a go signal from NASA, they would then continue on their journey to the moon. So now we're at the stage where the Orion module, or the Orion spacecraft, is near the moon now. And they're about to explain what's the difference between the Orion spacecraft and the Apollo missions from the previous years.
lander, the Artemis missions will take advantage of a different approach, pre-staging.
Pre-staging.
Everything needed for lunar missions will be positioned in advance by commercial and international partners. This
Wow.
includes rovers, science experiments, and human-rated systems on the surface.
Wow. So everything will be
Also
ready by
dedicated
then.
lunar station in orbit around the moon called Gateway. Here at this
Oh.
stage, we can pre-stage a robust lunar lander and establish a strong communications relay.
Whoa.
The Gateway can be expanded as new missions and partnerships develop, allowing
Wow.
multiple human missions on the moon
The Gateway.
and enabling ongoing science to be
amazing.
conducted
That's so
in
awesome.
between human missions. The Gateway is also capable of adjusting its orbit to allow access to every part of the moon, something the Apollo missions could not do. But the real key in this approach is placing
Yeah.
Gateway in a unique halo orbit to perfect the maneuvering
Wow.
of Mars missions. And with the growing list of commercial
Awesome.
and international opportunities, Gateway is the ideal hub between Earth and all that lies beyond. Returning to our crew as they approach Gateway, the Orion must match.
Wow. All right. That is so awesome. So what NASA is planning to do is that they're planning to build a space station, a new space station that would orbit the moon. This new space station would be called Gateway. So this Gateway space station that would be orbiting the moon would be carrying a lot of lunar modules, a lot of spacecrafts from which astronauts from the Gateway space station can descend to the moon. And since Gateway, the Gateway space station would be orbiting the moon, it would have access to all parts of the moon, and it can launch lunar missions easily to different parts of the moon. That is so amazing. So what's going to happen is that the Orion spacecraft, which is carrying our astronauts who are traveling to the moon, would dock with the Gateway space station. And there in Gateway space station, there's going to be a lot of supplies, a lot of supplies and oxygen, and the lunar modules would also be there. And then from the Gateway space station, they're going to take a lunar module which would descend to the surface of the moon. So that's awesome. It's just like what we see in the movies, you know. So this Gateway space station is going to be the headquarters of human astronauts who want to go to the moon. And instead of carrying all of these supplies from Earth to the moon back and forth, which would be very difficult, astronauts can now store all of their supplies for their lunar missions in this Gateway space station. And then from this humongous Gateway space station, they can easily descend to the moon on lunar missions. So that is so amazing. All right, now they're going to explain how the Orion spacecraft carrying our astronauts is going to dock with the Gateway space station.
Orion must match the elliptical orbit of the station in order to successfully dock.
Oh, they have to match.
Once on board, pre-selected crew members transfer to the lunar lander, while those assigned to Gateway remain on station. The lunar lander system.
Okay, so they're saying that once the Orion astronauts dock with the Gateway space station, some of the astronauts are going to stay in the Gateway space station, while some of the other astronauts would go to a lunar module which would be descending to the surface of the moon.
The lunar lander system itself is built for 3 unique steps. Descending from the halo orbit of Gateway down to a low lunar orbit, descending from low lunar orbit to the surface, and once the lunar mission is complete, launching from the surface of the moon and ascending all the way back to the orbiting Gateway.
Whoa, that's so awesome. So what's going to happen is for every lunar mission, astronauts would be descending from the Gateway space station. They would be taking a lunar module to descend to the surface of the moon. They're going to conduct their mission on the surface of the moon. And then afterwards, they're going to take a spacecraft back upwards, back to the orbiting Gateway space station. So this is now what we're seeing is after the lunar mission, they've ascended upwards again, and they're docking. Our astronauts are docking with the Gateway space station once again.
The Orion spacecraft and undocked from Gateway, the crew fire their engine once to break out of the halo orbit and once again to sling the spacecraft around the moon, placing it on a multi-day trajectory back to
Wow! So the Orion is
As they
going
near the end of
to
this
use the
journey,
gravity
the service
of the moon
module
to
is released,
slingshot back
and the
to
crew
the Earth.
module is oriented heat shield first. Entering Earth's atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour,
Awesome.
the friction of air slows
Wow.
Orion considerably, while also subjecting it
Orion.
to temperatures of 5,000 degrees. With the Orion now at just 300 miles per hour, a series of parachutes uniquely tested and produced for this moment
Yeah.
deploy,
So they're now
accelerating the
back-
craft to just
they're now back
20
on Earth.
miles per hour for splashdown.
Wow!
With each successful
That
mission,
is so cool.
Artemis ushers in the next wave of men and women to explore our moon and prove
Yeah.
together
Yes.
we are ready to go beyond.
We're Artemis. We're ready to go beyond. NASA. Let me just float back here. Okay, so that was a really good documentary video by NASA showing their Artemis program. It is so cool. It is so awesome. So they're planning to send missions back to the moon and beyond. And these missions are going to be called Artemis missions. So they're no longer called Apollo missions. Apollo missions were the space missions of NASA during the 1960s and 1970s. From now on, these lunar missions and beyond are going to be called Artemis programs. And what is so cool and amazing with these plans of NASA is that they're planning on building an orbiting space station called Gateway that would orbit the moon continuously, and all of the supplies of astronauts needed to go to the moon would be in this Gateway space station, which would be orbiting around the moon, and then humans can then launch multiple lunar missions simultaneously and have a long-term presence on the moon. And then from there, from the Gateway space station, humans can then launch other outer space explorations going to Mars and elsewhere into outer space. So this news is so exciting. Thank you, NASA. Thank you for your Artemis program. We're really looking forward to it. I am so excited to see humans back on the moon. I'm very excited to see this Artemis program. I'm very excited to see the Gateway space station completed, and I look forward to I'm looking forward to the next human visit to the moon. This is Space Exploration. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.